So the Roger Federer play is where you as hero get into a backhand-to-backhand exchange with your opponent villain. And you are using primarily strike zone and moving while hitting to throw your opponent off in this backhand-to-backhand exchange, which leads to either an inside-out or an inside-in forehand or some form of short ball where you can step in and typically rip it to the open court, but you can obviously hit it wherever is most beneficial to you. So let's walk through this play in a little bit more detail and then talk about some adjustments you can make. Now in this backhand-to-backhand exchange, we saw that, again, the two main factors, strike zone and hitting while moving. Now, of course, we can use some other factors as well if we want to. We'll get to that in just a second. But those two are good ones because you've got, if you've got this cross-court shot coming to the opponent, the slice is going to be landing, the contact point for the slice will be somewhere in here, and the contact point for the topspin ball will be somewhere there. So your opponent's going to have to move forward into the court and back, and then side to side to get to this, always recovering to right about here. And the net result of this is a lack of, your opponent's not able to get grooved on their groundies. So they're going to leave one cross court that is hanging. Either it's hanging right in the middle of the court here, you can step in and rip it, or they're going to send one cross court that's a little bit more cross court, a little bit deeper, but it's not their normal higher quality shot, so you can now move around this, hit an inside out or an inside in forehand. Now, before we talk about what to do with your forehands over here, let's discuss this cross-court backhand you are hitting. Because the topspin slice is a great starting point, but it is not the only thing you can be doing. And really it doesn't matter what you hit at your opponent because the end goal is to throw off their subsequent backhand. So you can hit anything as long as you throw off this subsequent shot. So at the Pro Tour, Roger has figured out, well, this slice here is quite effective. I'm going to use that, and I'm going to mix it in with some topspin. But what he also saw was against Novak Djokovic, the standard topspin ball wasn't great. So he actually threw in kind of this loopy, for a pro, you'd probably consider it a moon ball of sorts. So on that moon ball, maybe Djokovic is making contact back there. So what Fed did was he kind of branched out from the normal two he's using, the strike zone and the hitting while moving, and he also added a little bit more of an element of trajectory. And in reality, there's trajectory in there too with the slice and the topspin. The trajectory is a little bit different. But when he's really looping it, he's adding that steep trajectory off the court, that very significant change in the vertical height of the ball when it's kind of bombing onto the court and then bouncing off the court. So he added that extra one, and that led to some added inconsistency from Djokovic when he was playing Djokovic, having all these problems, and that led to more point-ending opportunities. Obviously, there's some errors in there, but there's more short balls where Fed can step in, and there's more opportunities to run around that backhand there. So you're getting, point-ending opportunities, short ball here. That is more cut and dry. You can rip this into the open court. You can maybe try and go behind your opponent. It's going to depend on whether your opponent is really anticipating the open court. If they're kind of staying over here, if they're anticipating the open court, you would go behind them. If they're hanging out here, you would go to the open court. But I want to talk about this, the deeper ball where you have an opportunity to run around, but maybe you're behind the baseline a little bit. What exactly do you want to do here? And the answer is it depends. When you're going the backhand here, this is, of course, part of the setup, right? And if you get a short ball, then you're in the point-ending opportunity. But if you run around one of these shots, one of these backhands turns it into a forehand, not necessarily a point-ending opportunity, could still be part of the setup. And if, in your estimation, it is still part of the setup, with this forehand here, you might want to hit inside out, and you do want to hit inside out if it's still part of the setup, but you might want to use a different factor here, right? So you've got the hitting while moving, you got the strike zone. And let's say your opponent is susceptible to that when you're hitting backhands. But what they're really weak with is maybe, a lack of time via pace, maybe trajectory too. But off this backhand here, you can't really tap into these factors down here. So if you run around and you get that forehand, let's say, your forehand's got a lot of pace. You can really rip that thing, hit it a lot harder than the backhand. Then you go inside out, right? You would aim for over here somewhere. Maybe not that aggressive, but over here, but you'd have a lot of pace, right? It'd be a ton of pace. That would, of course, cut down on the amount of time that you're giving your opponent. So that might elicit, hitting at the backhand, that might elicit the point ending opportunity, the short ball, or maybe the more cross-court ball, but you can step in a little bit more and rip that thing down the line. Or maybe you can really hit a loopy topspin forehand much more effectively than off the backhand. Then you loop that thing back cross-court. And instead of the pace and the power, then you'd be tapping into the trajectory, right? And we all know how effective those high trajectory balls are, especially the ones with a ton of topspin, to most right-handers' backhands, particularly if they have a one-handed backhand. So really, when you move around, the question you got to be asking yourself, and the trick with this play is when you move around to hit the forehand, you got to make a decision, do I go down the line? And really you only want to do that if you think you can get them, if it's really more of a point-ending opportunity. You've made that transition from the setup to the point-ending opportunity. If it's still more of the setup, then you might want to send it back cross-court and look to wait for a better opportunity cross-court. Now, if you do decide to go down the line and you're like, okay, it's point-ending opportunity time, typically you're going to be trying to take down the amount of time and pace, or excuse me, time your opponent has. So you're going to be using pace to do that. And when you hit into the, so you'd be pace high with this one, and when you hit into the open court, your opponent, of course, is going to be on the run. Now, there's certainly an opportunity to close and follow this thing to net, and it's going to depend in large part to how good of a shot you think you hit. And if it's not a ball where you just crushed and you think, okay, I can follow this to net, and that's particularly the case if you're further behind the baseline, you rip this thing, you're not going to be able to close. If you're inside, it's going to be much easier to close. So if you're around the baseline, behind the baseline, but you really get a hold of it, this is the point-ending opportunity situation. And again, it's not just one shot for point-ending opportunity. You could have multiple ones. So, or it could be a multiple shot sequence. So, this would be shot number one here, and you take that thing down the line. Now, what's likely to happen with this ball here is you're going to get a defensive shot, ideally short somewhere here. So you're going to be looking, you're going to hit this, and remember on court I said don't close over here, or excuse me, don't recover over here, which is typically where you would go if you go down the line in a neutral rally. You would actually hit this and then hang out somewhere around here, anticipating this shot over there. You hit a good enough shot with one, you don't think they can hit a great shot over here. So you're looking for a ball where you can step in inside the baseline here and then maybe rip it into the open court, and that'll be the end of the point. Or you'd rip it into the open court and then you would follow it into net here, and then on the subsequent volley probably put it into the open court again, and then the point is over there. So need to really evaluate on that inside in forehand where you are on the court, your depth, and then figure out whether you want to close or whether you want to use a multi-shot sequence. With all of these, you're probably going to be tapping into to power, right? Because the one thing you don't want to do is give your opponent a lot of time. If you kind of run around this and then just roll it into the open court, opponent's going to have time to get to it. So you're really trying to cut down on the amount of time they have. So you want to do that with power. Obviously, you want to be careful about not overhitting. The further you get into the court, the less you have to really swing for the fences, because you're just moving forward and there's less court for the ball to travel. You're going to be cutting down on your opponent's time just simply via your court position.